Right on the button. It's 7 o'clock. It's August 7th, 2023, and this is a regular meeting of Moscow City Council. Julia.
Please stand and join us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, great. First up tonight is the consent agenda, and the consent agenda consists of non-controversial or routine matters that have been previously vetted by the Public Works and Finance Committee or the Administrative Committee. Any item can be pulled for separate consideration by any member of the council.
Your Honor, I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you.
Stole it from Gina. Ha.
And Gina second.
I'm
Okay,
so predictable.
so Haley,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
and Drew.
Aye.
Okay, consent agenda is approved. Excellent. Next up is mayoral appointments, and I have one this evening who unfortunately could not be here tonight, but Jennifer Wallace for the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission for an expiration date of 12/31/2024.
Your Honor,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we approve Jennifer Wallace for Fair and Affordable Housing Commission.
Second it.
And Maureen seconded on that one. Okay, Drew,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
Maureen.
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
and Haley.
Aye. Enthusiastically.
Oh, good.
Me too. With gusto.
I like enthusiasm. So I'm sure she would have a few words for us were she here, but alas,
She's off
she's
singing.
not.
On vacation.
Yep.
He's on watching singing.
So very good. Okay, moving along briskly, it's a public comment and mayor's response period. And for the next 15 minutes in 3-minute increments, if you have something on your mind, please come up to the podium, give your name, your address, and tell us what's on your mind, as long as it's not pending before tonight's agenda or before Planning and Zoning or the Board of Adjustment. And if you have more information than will fit into 3 minutes, please send us a written or an emailed text to hit the salient points, and your input, written or emailed, will still be entered onto the record. Any takers for public comment tonight? Okay, no tsunami of people coming up to the podium. So next up, we have the Citizens Commission report for the Sustainable Environment Commission with Kyle Steele, and we don't have Steve McGeehan. So,
No.
I do believe we have a
Good evening, Your Honor.
a substitute.
Very
Tina will
worthy.
be substituting for Mr. McGeehan tonight. So,
rock on, please.
just real quickly, Tina has been with Miss Tina Hilding has been with the Sustainable Environment Commission for roughly a decade now. She is the vice chair of the commission and will be giving the report tonight.
Another pesky vacation intervenes for Steve, I guess.
He's out
Or
doing
work.
something fun.
Welcome, Tina. What you got for us?
Okay. Oh, okay, the sustain. I'm Tina Hilding, and I'm with the Sustainable Environment Commission. And so, as you know, our mission is to solicit advice and information about sound environmental management practices for promoting the public health and safety of the citizens of Moscow. Okay, we meet Tuesdays each month at 6. And agenda topics are suggested by SEC members or responding to citizen questions and concerns. We get monthly reports from Kelly Cooper, Kyle Steele, and our Moscow High School representative. Ian has now just recently graduated. And then the Climate Action Working Group is a subcommittee that's also usually gives a regular report. So So as you guys know, the City Council identified climate change as a major challenge to be included in the strategic plan a couple of years ago, I think. And so the Climate Action Plan was approved in October of 22, calls for Moscow community to reach net zero emissions by 2050 to help reduce harmful carbon emissions and prevent the most harmful effects of climate change, reduce community-wide emissions by more than 50% by 2035. And some of the priorities in the Climate Action Plan include decarbonizing the electric power grid, building efficiency, building electrification, and adaptation measures. Those are a few priorities in the plan. And I just want to remind you that this is urgent. And a couple examples, the water temperature in Florida, in the ocean in the last few weeks have been over 100 degrees, record-setting heat waves nationwide and around the world, as has been predicted by scientists for 40 years, extreme weather events around the world, wildfires in Canada, and unfortunately, as one fellow says here and has been said by others, this is probably one of the coolest summers you'll ever see in your life, unfortunately. However, on the positive side, we have agency. Agency is supposed to be up there. Let me scoot through here, hold on. Wait for my agency to show up. We have agency. Idaho's share of carbon dioxide emissions that contribute to climate change, we put out 20.5 million metric tons with a population of 1.9 million. So Ethiopia does about the same, and they have a population of 120 million people. Denmark puts out 27 million metric tons with a population of 5.9 million people. Guatemala puts out 20 million metric tons with a population of 17 million people. So we are doing more than our fair share, and we can do a lot to cut down on our emissions. So the most optimal thing that we have going for us that we can do is education and outreach efforts. And that's what the SEC is doing, focused on. So we've started a monthly how-to column that just got started in the Moscow Pullman Daily News.
Written by yourself?
I did start the first one. Yeah, the idea is to give lots of practical solutions, helpful. And we also are wanting to start putting together brochures regarding cost and how to save money and carbon. And as the cost of renewables goes down, and with many tax incentives, that's becoming more doable. So we did a farmer's market the other day where we gave out some information, and we have one coming up September 9th as well. We're trying to make people aware of training opportunities such as a new carbon conscious construction degree program and certificate program that's through WSU, for instance. And we also did a letter of support for the Moscow Middle School solar project. So those are some of the education and outreach efforts that we're doing. So yes, we all know that immediate action is required and carbon emissions need to be considered in every decision that we make. So that's an opportunity to do more. Okay, now what's on here? And this is what we did at the SCC Farmers Market table, handed out native seed packets with artwork from Palouse Prairie School, provided information about home improvement tax credits and carbon reduction incentives available through the Inflation Reduction Act, and we provided information on water conservation, information and efforts. So, and then we've had some great folks that have visited us to provide us information and to chat about how we can help with city efforts. And I have to say, I will put in a plug for the amazing staff here in the city that I've been so impressed with. Mike Gray, who I thought was.
He's in there. He's in the back.
He gave a great presentation to the Climate Action Working Group on city efforts and code, ways that we can have climate change impacts, how we can help. Justin Goodwin also discussed building code opportunities to support climate change goals. Tyler Palmer recently discussed the water issues relevant to the city of Moscow. So those were some, and Dave Schott always is so helpful in talking about pesticides and herbicides in the city. And they have started the one pesticide-free park per calendar year, which is a great thing. And so those are some of the things that we have done with guests. Oh yeah, and we gave out the Earth Day Awards, and that recognized Moscow residents, and we had so many this year. I was really, great folks in our community who are doing great things, and I especially want to point out City of Pullman that has started a Sustainable Environment Commission, basically, and are working on developing a climate action plan or making efforts in that way. So I just thought that was really amazing. So just thought I'd mention that. And then these are our members of the current roster of the Sustainable Environment Commission, and including staff Kelly Cooper, who is also amazing, does work so hard, and she's doing so much with the irrigation efforts this summer, helping people out with saving water all over the community. So, and thanks to Maureen also as our council liaison. So, and thank you all of you for your support. And are there any questions?
Thanks, Tina. Who has questions?
I have one for you. No, I don't think a hard one. Is there anything like at the top of your list right now that's new for you all that you're really looking at?
I think for me, the thing I'm focused on is the outreach and education. I think there's the building fellow who was Justin, when he was at the COG and he was talking about, we were looking at what we can do to get the word out to contractors and to people in the community about the opportunities to save carbon. And he said he got on his text and he got a hold of a contractor and found out it's one mortgage payment, $1,500, to put in a heat pump, which decarbonizes your house and provides air conditioning. It's $1,500 more than a furnace or something like that. Anyway, I can't remember, but there's a lot of opportunities. And I think it's a matter of the public becoming aware of the incentives and the need. So.
Mr. Mayor, if I might just, for our avid viewers at home and our audience, I figured it's always worth clarifying. I think the tremendous work that the team did for the climate action plan is really incredible. I was glad to see it adopted. And just as far as we received a lot of concern about people feeling like we were telling them that they can't install things in their homes. And once again, to clarify, the sphere of influence that we have is over decisions and planning within city resources, city buildings. And in part, it's because of state law. And I don't know what that conversation would look like otherwise, but it's been really great seeing everyone at the city, staff included, rally around this idea of doing what we can as a city with our own resources to make sure that Moscow is still a great place to be for future generations and future people. So I figure just layers of paint, worth reiterating once we mention it. Thanks, Tina.
which is why I sit there and think the whole emphasis on education is a really good thing, because we have control over the city in some respects. And, but it's kind of how do you educate people to the value of looking at things more sustainably.
Yep. And I would also say, in my job, I talk with engineers all the time. That's researchers doing, and in particular, I just was talking yesterday with a fellow world expert in the electric power grid, and he said it's doable. We can decarbonize the electric power grid. We can do this. It's just we have to put in the effort, and it's affordable. We can solve the challenges with investment.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tina.
And thanks to you and all the other volunteers on the Sustainable Environment Commission, as well as all the other volunteers on all of the other commissions. We take the work very seriously and really appreciate the effort you guys put into it. It's good stuff. Okay, next up is a public hearing, a proposed comprehensive plan amendment and rezone of a 12.26 acre property located at the northwest corner of the Palouse River Drive and Mountain View Road intersection. And this will be delivered by Mike Ray. Public hearings work like this. A lot of you have already heard this, but the hearing is opened. Staff presents the information relevant to the hearing. Council asks some questions, after which we hear from the public in pro, con, and neutral testimony. After that, we close the public hearing, and then the council goes into deliberation and achieves a consensus and a vote. So Mike, please go ahead. The hearing is open.
Thank you, Your Honor, Council. So before you tonight, we have a proposal on behalf of Bloom Enterprises 4 LLC. It's a comp plan land use designation amendment, as well as a rezone 12.126 acre property located at the northwest corner of Palouse River Drive and Mountain View Road intersection. Current comprehensive plan land use designations, auto urban residential, auto urban commercial, and suburban commercial. And the proposal is the high density residential designation. Current designation for the zoning is farm, ranch, and motor business. And the proposal is to rezone that to R4, which is our multiple family residential zone. So this is the subject property, northwest intersection of Palouse River Drive, Mountain View Road. Indian Hills Drive here to the north, running east-west. Single family residential development here to the west. Indian Hills Park to the northwest. And then a mixture of residential uses. This is multifamily, 3-story apartment buildings here to the north, a multifamily townhouse style development, and then a smaller PUD with 10 lots located there to the east. This is single family. And then the USDA office building to the northeast. This is an 80-acre property here to the east. And of course, you have Alturas Technology Park further to the north here. Just a closer view of the property. That brings us to the current comprehensive plan land use designation. Like I mentioned before, it's currently a combination of auto urban residential, suburban commercial, and auto urban commercial. Auto urban commercial is the darker shade of pink here. Designation here to the east is currently auto urban commercial as well. That's the 80 acres. You can see high density residential with the apartments and multifamily to the north, auto urban commercial, USDA, as well as the PUD as well. And then shifting to business park with Alturas Technology Park to the north. And as we transition to the west, it's auto urban residential. So the proposal before you tonight is the high density residential designation. So coincides with the high density residential there to the north and provides a transition from auto urban commercial to the east, as well as auto urban residential to the west. So taking a look at what that says in the comp plans, highest density residential development at common densities between 15 and 26 units per acre. Areas appropriate for that designation are located adjacent to areas of higher activity where there's a range of uses. Should be located adjacent or in close proximity to designated arterial or collector streets. So Palouse River Drive and Mountain View Road are currently designated as minor arterial streets. And then new areas should be located near mixed-use activity areas and corridors that accommodate multimodal transportation. And then it points to the R3, R4, and RO zoning districts as being most appropriate for that designation. So this brings us to the current zoning configuration of the area. Farm, ranch, and motor business are the current zoning districts on the subject property. You can see the frontage on Mountain View Road is the motor business, and then this would be the farm ranch, as well as the single-family residential property there to the west. On the north side of Indian Hills Drive, you have residential office, which is really similar to the R4 zone, a little bit more intense, allows more professional office type uses. General business here with the USDA building, and then RTO as you transition to Alturas Technology Park. Within Indian Hills 6th edition, there's various zones. You have the R3 zone here, R2, and then that transitions to R4 and RO as you head towards Alturas. So this would be the proposal to rezone to the multiple family residential R4 zone. So what that says in the zoning code provides for the most intense residential land uses permitted in the community. It's to be applied where activity levels are high and adequate public facilities are available, especially near the U of I campus or the central business zoning district. And then adequate transportation access should be given high priority, determining locations. There are really a wide range of residential uses, so single family all the way to multifamily, twin homes, townhouses as well. Also limited professional office uses are permitted in R4, as well as bed and breakfast, daycare facilities, and parking lots. Like I mentioned previously, Palouse River Drive and Mountain View Road are minor arterials, currently not developed to that standard. They do not have curb, gutters, or sidewalks on either side of the street. Indian Hills Drive is fully developed. It's a local neighborhood street. It's paved with curb, gutter, tree lawn, sidewalks on both sides. And there are existing water and sewer mains within the surrounding streets, which are of sufficient capacity to accommodate any future use the R4 zone would allow on the property. Planning and Zoning Commission conducted a public hearing earlier this year, June 28th. They recommended approval of the comp plan amendment as well as the rezone request with no conditions. Staff's recommendation for the council tonight is to conduct a public hearing upon the comp plan land use designation amendment and rezone. And upon consideration of any testimony presented, number one, approve the proposed comp plan land use designation resolution and adopt P&Z's RCS. And number two, if the comprehensive plan land use designation resolution is approved, then approve the proposed zoning ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary, as well as adopting P&Z's relevant criteria and standards. I'd certainly try to answer any questions you had.
Maureen?
So if the development is approved, will they install curbs, gutter, and sidewalks?
That'd be the responsibility of development of the property just on that side of the street that the property is adjacent to.
Okay. There was a lot, one more question. There was a lot of a consistent testimony by one resident in the area who was concerned about speed, noise, busy streets, and traffic. Has there been concern to address, any way to address those issues?
I think that a lot of that stems from the current construction activity in the area. They're still working on some of the single family dwellings as well as the apartment complexes. And so I think that was a concern with just site distances and construction apparatus parked on the street. But certainly that'd be an enforcement issue in the future. So speeds increase. There could be police enforcement as far as taking a look at that corridor and making sure that everybody's abiding by the speed limit. But anticipated when this property is developed that the majority of the traffic would use Mountain View Road, Palouse River Drive. Those are minor arterials meant to accommodate large volumes of traffic.
I just want to make sure that was addressed because it was several times that it came up as an issue and I never quite figured out where the answer was to that question. So thank you.
I have a couple questions, some similar to Maureen's. Have we considered any kind of traffic calming development along Indian Hills and Blaine that kind of feeds as a collector for that area?
Not to my knowledge, no.
So, full disclosure, I live right there on the corner of Blaine and Alturas, and people go pretty fast through there. and it's really wide, so it just seems like it's just, designed to go fast, which I would prefer that people not do. And then another question in terms of transportation, that intersection of Highway 8 and Mountain View and the trail there seems like very dangerous to me. Is there any plan to change that intersection with all the new development on that side of the highway?
I believe ITD plans a signalized intersection at that point, at some point in the future. As part of the, whatever development should occur on this property, like, once again, this is just the rezone of the property. When a development proposal comes forward, I think our engineering department will assess whether a traffic impact study is warranted to identify, what percentage money should go towards the improvement of that intersection.
So we would potentially first rezone it, potentially build more apartments there, and then address the intersection?
The rezone would come first, and then a proposal would be presented. They really range between intensity. So you could have a single family house built on the entire property. It could be multiple family residential, apartment buildings. And so really you need to define what the use is going to be on the property before we could kind of mitigate the impacts of that use.
Okay. There were some other comments in the public hearing about the area being developed, but not allowing undergraduate students in the apartments, which I am not sure is
Legal?
appropriate.
That's kind of getting ahead of the game here. That depends upon the use. And right now we're in for the comp plan and the rezone,
It was in the public hearing though.
which is fine. Which public hearing? Comments at the
No, it's
developer meeting? That's not the same. P&Z has had a public hearing, but whether these were discussed, and they probably shouldn't have been, because those type of concerns are irrelevant as far as the comprehensive plan and the rezone.
Can you explain then when in the process it becomes relevant? So that the question doesn't keep coming up. Can you answer that question? So if it doesn't make sense to do it at the planning and zoning, the question is, when does it come up then?
Your Honor, if I might. So the question is related to how the properties are managed and rented and whether they comply with the fair housing law and other regulations. Is that the question?
Mhm.
Because generally we don't enforce, we have, we do have a provision in city code that addresses discrimination on housing and employment. It's not something that we regulate at the land use development stage, but it's once it's completed, then they would have to comply with all relevant city and federal regulations. And if we received a report that they were in violation, then we take appropriate action that time. We can't prospectively anticipate that there may be some violation in the future. So it's not something that we would regulate at the time of consideration of the appropriate zoning of the property.
But it was a justification for why this would be okay.
It shouldn't be. You
It's
should
in
look
the
at.
record.
Well, so people can testify, but as a council or as the Planning and Zoning Commission looks at a potential development, they should look at the development and what are the permitted uses in that zoning district. So in this case, it's multifamily housing. So it could be any form of multifamily housing that has any potential tenants or occupants or residents in that development. You should look at it in that way because we cannot condition it to be certain occupants. So you have to look at the appropriateness of the use, the location, the services and facilities that serve that property to make sure that you feel it's appropriate for that zoning designation, irrespective of, what somebody represents the tenants may be, that who knows if that's still going to be the case in the future as a property develops. So it's just, you should look at the use itself and not consider extraneous testimony related to who the occupants may be.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I've got a couple that hopefully are still within this land use conversation. One being a reminder, can you remind me, is it a density threshold that we passed that talks about park dedication, and when you start talking about there needing to be additional parkland reserved? I can't remember what the threshold is.
That's through the subdivision.
Okay, so that's like a few steps down the road.
Right.
Groovy. That that was another question that came up in the neighborhood meeting thing. I just want to understand so that if we get questions, I can tell them we're not there yet. And then my other question, I think to the Highway 8 thing, it's another kind of pickle. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but we're in another pickle where it is ITD's jurisdiction and the highway's jurisdiction. So it's kind of tricky. My understanding is they've got a study funding, traffic study funded for 2024 for the Highway 8 corridor between Moscow and Troy. So pending they stay on track and stay on track with their funding. I think they're looking more in terms of like passing lanes and stuff, but I am really excited to see what ITD comes up with for that intersection, because my next question is, I'm really concerned about any additional traffic on Palouse River Drive and Mountain View. While I'm glad to see high density, the potential for high density coming up with R4 coming back around to us for review, I'm really concerned about what the Mountain View Palouse River Drive intersection looks like, because that Highway 8 intersection is so hairy. And so I'm trying to understand what our long-term, without knowing what R4 could mean and knowing all that comes under the umbrella of R4, I would love to know what our, if any, long-term plans are for Mountain View Road with Palouse River Drive, because I was thinking they were outside of city limits, but I can't remember what. If it's 5 years down the road, then we can talk about it in 5 years, but I couldn't remember what's on the radar for us with those improvements, if
I don't
any.
believe there's anything in the capital
Okay.
improvement plan that addresses those roads, but certainly as property develops along that
Right.
whole stretch, I mean, think about all the way at 95. I mean, we've slowly, incrementally developed those properties, and improvements have been made along the north side of Palouse River Drive. And so similar to what's happened in those areas will occur here. As properties developed, then the road, sidewalk, curb gutter will all be constructed as part of that.
And so is that part of why we didn't ask for requirements for the Alturas, last follow-up, Mr. Mayor, for the developments on the USDA building and the Alturas stretch?
They are improved.
They are improved to that point. So we dead end right where Indian Hills is that correct, with the curb and gutter right now?
Correct.
Okay. Groovy. As far as land use questions, I believe I have stayed in my lane, and I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
Gina.
Mr. Belknap, I appreciate your clarification of what we should be considering. And if memory serves, the conversation did occur at Planning and Zoning, but they too looked at the zoning parts of this and listened to what people had to say. But it was quite a vigorous discussion, if I remember correctly, about what was allowed and what isn't allowed to be discussed in those meetings. So I do believe that they did their due diligence. I see no reason why we would not rezone this property to R4.
We're just in question time now. We get to deliberate a minute.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to make a motion, but thank you for shushing me.
Yeah, we still have ways to go before we get to the deliberation.
Yes,
bit,
thank you.
so
I'm done discussing.
sorry
Thank
about
you.
that.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I've got one last question. Could we look at the R4 definition? It was interesting to me that we specifically call out the U of I and the other thing, especially near U of I campus or central business. Okay. Hello. Okay. Thank you. I was not expecting the specific call out. Thank you.
Okay. So next up, we come to the public testimony part. And at this time, I'd invite anybody who would like to speak in favor of this to step up to the podium, name and address, and tell us what's on your mind. So in favor of.
My name's Dan Schoenberg. I'm a co-owner of Palouse Properties here in Moscow. My address is 1009 Red Tail Lane here in the Moscow area. And I'm here to speak in favor of the rezone. As a housing provider in our community, and having watched this in particular this year, I purchased Palouse Properties in 2004, and I have not seen the housing shortage in all that time that I've seen this particular year. And I think it's part of the growth of our community. I think it's part of what we need to be able to do in order to not only support the institution, but to support our local economy and local businesses and provide adequate housing for individuals who are in our community. I'll speak a little bit to the no undergraduate because I was part of that conversation and part of that piece. And so I'll clarify that a little bit. We manage various properties across the community. And we do have some properties in our community that we advertise for no undergraduate students. From a fair housing perspective, undergraduate students are not a protected class. If you're an undergraduate student and you are a non-traditional student as a family unit, you fall in a protected class and you'd be eligible for any housing of that nature. And over time, we've had to adjust as the community adjusts. So when I say that, we've got some properties over on Baker Street that are listed as no undergraduate students. They're primarily occupied by professionals and families, law students, WWAMI students, and it creates a community with like living habits, so that we don't have an infant next door with a 2 a.m. party beside it. That doesn't necessarily stop it all the time, but it does make the communities a little more comprehensive. But what I do also find is that as we change and grow over time as a community, we find the need to change the management philosophy on any particular building. So a building today that might be no undergraduate student building, we may need to transition to undergraduate students depending upon what our community looks like and what the demographics of our community looks like. And I think that's just responsible management on our part and on part of the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, further testimony in favor of? All you have to do is just walk up and we say,
Well, I wasn't going to say
name and
anything.
address again. Just
Tina Hilding, 411 North Howard in Moscow. And I was confused because I'm not sure if I'm in favor or against.
Well, we
but-
also have neutral coming up.
I guess I had a question and so I don't know when to say it, but anyway.
Well, while you're there,
Sorry. In terms of, and I know they said about having multimodal transportation, and I was wondering like when you would make the decision about Palouse River Drive and Mountain View in terms of discouraging fast traffic with traffic calming and making it walkable and bikeable for, as I said, climate carbon reduction at every step. So that's
the
kind of my question.
okay. Have any response to that?
Well, the street standards for minor arterial for both of those streets include bike lanes on both sides and no parking, as well as widened sidewalks. And so as those properties are developed and those improvements are made, then it just becomes multimodal.
Yeah, also interaction with smart transit to extend a south route is under consideration, has been for a while. And when they get the resources, there'll be an extension of smart transit through there.
Was that both Mountain View and Palouse River Drive where you have?
They're both minor
Okay,
arterials.
thank you.
Yep.
So, okay, thanks. Anyone else in favor of? Okay, testimony in opposition. Nobody's twitching in their seat, so we'll move along to testimony of a general nature. And again, nobody. Okay, at this time, the public hearing is closed and council initiates its deliberations, discussions, and resolution. Council. Sandra.
So I just want to say before we vote, I am absolutely in favor of needing more growth. And I I am in favor of this, but I am really concerned about Palouse River Drive and Mountain View Road. I know both folks on either end talked a lot about Mountain View. I drive Palouse River Drive a lot, and at night it's awful. Like you can't see the side of the road. You know where you're going to fall off or not. And I just hope that as we go and make this a really great living area for lots of folks, that we aren't too far behind in making sure that we keep up on those roads, because there's no lighting and you can't see into the road, and much less walking or biking, but even just driving is really scary there. So that's where my concern is. I'm absolutely in favor of rezoning it, because we do need that, but we also need to be really safe roadwise. And I just wanted to get that out there.
To answer her question is, and I'm going to follow up that with a question, which is there some kind of regulation with respect to lighting and stuff on either of those roads, like Mountain View? I mean, I know that normally at the beginning of a block and the end of a block, we have a light, but but I'm just curious on whether or not there's any requirements at all on Palouse River Drive for lighting.
I believe our typical standard is just street intersections. I can't speak to what the dimension is before you have a long stretch without an intersection where you have a light, but I know that every intersection requires a street light.
And if you do look at the higher density development just to the north, you can see multiple entrances onto Indian Hills Drive up there. And given the size of the property, you might anticipate that there'll be other intersections along the way.
I have an additional question. Does that mean that once the subdivision is, or the plat is done, that there could be potentially a lot more lighting?
Certainly along the Palouse River Drive and Mountain View Road frontage of this property, correct?
That's what I thought you said. I just wanted to be clear on it. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple comments. I agree with, the intersection that we're talking about. But also that land has to be developed as we go on. It shouldn't be carried by the owner to do that. It should be for their property, which we're talking about. But yeah, it is a concern. Secondly, I think, we're living in a city. Some people consider it good or bad that we're growing. I think it's good that we're growing. Cities either grow or they shrink, period, right? Yeah. So that comes with challenges. The challenges that we're seeing are we need housing. We need a lot of housing. We've heard tonight that we're finding problems with that. At this time, we're not talking about what housing it may be. However, we need to provide opportunities for that. And that's what I hang my hat on. So.
Is it my turn now, Mr. Mayor?
One additional note, if that's okay, before
Absolutely.
Gina does her thing. I also want to make it clear, I understand why we got to where we are with how Mountain View and Palouse River Drive looks as we approach this budget conversation. I understand that we can only prioritize what is immediately in front of us as the development comes in the places that it's actively coming. And so with the funding mechanisms we have, I am delighted to know that we are all aware of how hairy that intersection is and would prioritize the conversation when it comes for traffic calming, bike infrastructure, curbs, parks, and all that. So I trust the system. I trust the process. Gina, back to you. That's what I got.
Well, I don't even know how to follow that really. So it feels like I've been holding my breath for maybe 10 minutes now waiting to make this motion. I move that we approve the proposed comprehensive plan land use designation resolution and adopt the Planning and Zoning Commission reason statement of relevant criteria.
Second.
That was a tie. Drew. So moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, Haley,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Julia,
No.
and Drew.
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-1. All right. Let's see. There's another action to be taken.
Am I supposed to do it again?
Well, you can if you want, or somebody
Okay.
else can.
I move that we that we approve the proposed zoning ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary, and adopt the Planning and Zoning Commission reason statement of relevant criteria.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hey, Drew,
Aye.
Julia,
No.
Maureen,
Hi.
Gina,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
and Haley.
Aye.
Okay, passes also 5-1. So have an ordinance to read. Do we have a number?
2023-06, Your Honor.
Okay, ordinance number 2023-06. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, providing for the rezoning of an approximately 13.85 acre property described in Section 2 from the Farm Ranch FR and Motor Business MB to multiple family residential R4, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval, and publication according to law.
Did the distance change?
Yeah.
The acreage changed?
This will be 12.2.
It was 12.26 in our,
We rezoned to the middle of the street.
to the middle of
The
the
zoning
street?
goes to the middle of the street.
Okay.
Oh.
Thank you.
On two sides.
On 2 sides. All right, I get it.
Thanks, Mike.
So hence the difference there.
Good catch.
Okay. Next up is another public hearing, City of Moscow's FY 2024 annual budget from Bill Belknap and Sarah Banks. And as this is another public hearing and nobody new has come in, the rules still apply. Staff presents, council questions. We hear from those in attendance, the public in favor of, anti, and of neutral testimony. The public hearing then closes and council deliberates. So Bill, hearing is open. You're on.
Let me just note the time for Lori. Hearing open. Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. So as the council is aware, the budget really is the city's fiscal plan. It sets out our anticipated revenues and our anticipated expenditures for the operations of the municipal corporation. Our revenues include a variety of sources, property tax, state shared revenues, fees for services, grants, intergovernmental revenues. They do come from a variety of different sources. And the expenses of the budget represent our delivery of services to the community, the operations of our utilities, our accumulation in capital construction, and our accumulation for future capital improvement needs of the city. The council recently, just about a year ago, went through and updating our strategic plan major challenge areas. Those that were identified as being the most critical for the community were to continue action on an alternative water source, to stabilize and improve medical service staffing, to address our substandard emergency communication radio system. Well, we're currently where officers and firefighters in certain locations in the city cannot communicate with dispatch, as well as to replace the city's aging shop that is approaching 60 plus years old, has safety concerns, does not meet the current operational needs, and continue to try to recruit sufficient staff to perform essential functions. That most recently has been a focus in the law enforcement, where we've had nearly a third of our force positions vacant as we try to fill those positions. Going to tier 2 and to the moderate important category, inadequate funding to maintain city streets is somewhat of a constant condition, but we also need to keep that on the radar. To focus and work on improvements to our downtown streetscape that has been deteriorating over the last 40 years. To preserve the city's urban forest, and to also focus on helping to try to address the affordable housing issue in the community and continue to reinforce and improve multimodal transportation and connectivity. Going to kind of tier 3, then we go to trying to improve the city's gateway aesthetics and beautification. So again, the appearances of the community to guests and visitors and residents as well. Looking forward to playfield development, rehabilitation, and expansion to meet future needs and continue to support local economic development. So just a few highlights in the budget today. From the perspective of new personnel, we only have one new position that is proposed in the budget, that is a communications manager. That is a full-time position that is proposed in administration for this upcoming fiscal year. We also had a relocation of personnel. So Corey Oglesby, who is our digital media specialist. We have moved from IS, or proposing to move from IS to back in administration FY24, to team up with that communications manager and make sure that we can help share information about the city's activities and good work with the community and beyond. We also had to work on part-time wage adjustments. That's probably been, over the course of the last 2 years, one of our most significant challenges as we saw service industry, fast food restaurant wages increase very rapidly over the course of the last several years. We have struggled to obtain any seasonal employees. So we are adjusting those hourly rates by $1 or $2, depending upon the position and the requirements for licensure, CDL and otherwise, with the hope. But we have really struggled in really all of our seasonal operations with seasonal personnel. We also added a small currently, Corey does that duty as well, as council meetings also runs down to the market. And so we've added some additional, I think it was $3,000 in part-time wages to help that and free up his time to focus on more important work for the city. And the last item on here is a partnership. We've been working with the fire department trying to help improve coverage, especially during the holiday period. So the student residents that participate in our program really staff those stations 24/7. And during the holiday time periods, we really do struggle with coverage for fire events. So we are this year proposing to offer stipends to student residents or even regular members who wish to take 12 or 24-hour shifts and staff the station during those critical times, to ensure that we have a minimum of 2 people essentially on a shift at 24 hours a day. So we have at least the fire apparatus staffed that can then be supplemented with other volunteer members if an event happens. But we really have struggled with that. So the cost of that stipend program for the course of the year is $24,000. That's going to be shared 50-50 with the Moscow Volunteer Fire Organization, so $12,000 each to help fund that program. We're going to pilot that this year and see how that goes. For compensation program adjustments, normally our cost of living is driven by the CPI. CPI finished last year at a total of 8%, and that's not a number that we can financially support. So we have programmed a 5% cost of living increase for all city employees. Normally, we would budget a 4% performance increase for employees, so we borrowed 1% for that to help improve the cost of living. So in addition to the 5% cost of living, we have a 3% annual performance increase. Again, we have a pay per performance system. So what an employee may see an increase is going to depend upon their evaluation score and their performance. For our health insurance program, we did increase, the council decided to increase our dependent coverage to 55%. So that just happened most recently. We were covering 50% of dependent care. And we also increased our VIVA contribution $100 to help improve coverage there. So from $500 to $600 for an annual contribution.
Can I
You may
ask a question on that real quickly?
Yeah.
If you go back
Sure.
quickly. What percent of the employees get an annual performance evaluation that gives them the 3% increase? Hard number, I'm sure I didn't give you prepared for that.
Yeah. So let me just say let me just show how, I guess, talk about how we structure it.
Okay.
So, we do have sworn officers, so all the way up to sergeant, that are on a step and grade system on the police department. So they don't participate in AMPS. It is a defined percentage increase step. So for the remaining employees that are in the AMPS system, every year we establish the curve by taking the average score. And essentially, if you obtain an average score, you will receive the full 3% plus the cost of living increase, assuming you're not at the maximum of your position. If you hit the maximum, then you may only get the cost of living increase. Anybody that scores below that average score then receives less than that 3%. And anybody who scores above that will receive potentially, up to 1% or so more than that 3%. It's typically a pretty typical bell curve distribution around that average score. So I don't know that I say it's technically 50-50 on each side of that line, but we probably have, well, I couldn't give you an exact number, but I would say, you're probably looking at 40 to 50 that are below that number and maybe 50 to 60 that might be above that number.
So, it seems to me that, that like 40 to 50% of them would be getting 8%.
Correct.
Okay.
And every year it pretty much averages out, the percent increases across just average out to what we budget and hits that number right on the dot.
Okay, thank you.
This is just a little refresher when we were having the conversation about health insurance costs for the city of Moscow and for dependents specifically. So we do pay 100% for the employee's health care cost. And historically, we paid 50% of dependent care and the employee covered the other 50%. So we did a comparison with Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston, Post Falls, and Pullman. And again, this column over here on the far right is us shifting to 55%. So if you look at the bottom of an employee with a full family, with Coeur d'Alene, they'll pay $169. With Lewiston, the employee will pay $300. Post Falls, $165. Pullman, $327. Here, an employee, even after shifting to paying 55%, will pay $735 a month out of their check for their full family care. So it was going to be a little bit over $800 this year, $815 roughly, if we did not shift to 55% coverage. So we're just trying to maybe slowly help reduce that burden on the employees and be more competitive. On an average employee, this will add up to, in excess of $8,000 or $9,000 per year they pay. Maybe it's a difference of $6,000 to $7,000. So if we're trying to recruit a police officer, if we're already not competitive on wages or barely competitive, when they look at the benefit costs, that really does impact us in the long run. So we are working to try to help address that issue incrementally over time. So let's talk a little bit about property taxes. So the budget includes the following property tax adjustments. So it does include our allowable 3% inflationary increase allowed under state law. So that produces $207,000 added to the property tax levy. The budget also proposes taking an additional 1% of the foregone. So you may recall foregone are those years that the city did not take that full 3% increase. We can bank those dollars and go back and add those to the levy at some point in the future. After a bill a couple sessions ago, our ability to bring that in has been severely limited in that we can only bring it in at 1% per year for ongoing expenses. So you may recall there have been various points in time where we've gone back and for the runway realignment project at the airport, we went back and captured $219,000 of foregone to accumulate money to make our financial contribution to that project. Or when we really were struggling with law enforcement salaries, we went back for for additional foregone. Right now, after House Bill 389, we're limited to that 1% increase for those times. And right now we see, a significant inflationary time where we're seeing high cost in health insurance and liability insurance and everything. But all we can really go back to take is that 1%. So that will add $72,102.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When's the last time I'm picturing the abacus in my head. When was the last time we did not take the full 3%?
It's been several years.
And
probably
and
close to, no, I'm trying to recall. Maybe 2020 during the pandemic, we may have not taken it that year. I'd have to go
When
back and
everything
recall,
was-
but I think that was the last time that we may not have.
And how many remaining funds do we have to move here? How many remaining 1% do we have for
If I
foregone?
recall correctly, there's maybe 170,000 left in Fort after
you.
this.
Thank you.
I think we were 240.
Yeah.
I think there's about 243, if I recall correctly, that's available prior to this additional. If the council chooses to take the 1%, there'd be roughly about 170,000 left.
Thank you.
We also are able to bring in the value of new construction. Again, that was also limited with House Bill 389. So previously we were able to take the 100% value of that new construction, apply last year's levy to it and add that to our levy so that those homes paid the same rate of existing homes. House Bill 389 limited that to 90% of the value. So for this year, that represents $86,006 of new value, and then 90% again of annexations, $2,438. So the total property tax revenue gain for this year is $351,377. Important to note, the city's assessed valuation grew considerably last year, and we also saw significant growth this year. So the city's total assessed valuation increased by 18% this year. So we went from roughly 1.5 billion to 1.9 billion, and then this year it's gone up to 2.2. So our levy rate will drop considerably from last year. So the levy rate is currently estimated at $3.61 per thousand of assessed valuation. That'd be a decrease from last year's levy rate of $4.05 per thousand assessed valuation. As I mentioned, inflation, we're continuing to see increased costs. Our liability premiums increased significantly this year due to market turbulence. Our health insurance premiums increased 8.8% across essentially a $1.8 million cost to the city for health insurance. Vista is requesting a 15.4% increase in electricity rates and a 3.5% increase in natural gas rates. We don't expect they'll receive the full increase from the Public Utilities Commission, but we do expect to see increases, and those affect pool operations, utility operations, well pump operations, and especially the wastewater treatment facility. And while capital costs are coming in closer, we are still sitting at elevated levels compared to the pre-pandemic bidding climate. And during the first 6 months of this calendar year, that CPI has averaged 4.9% so far this year. So it is slowing. That's good to see, but we also are still elevated, well above the 3% allowable levy increase. As I mentioned, the 3% increases, that amount, taking the additional 1% foregone would cost a homeowner with a home that's valued at $400,000 about 85 cents per month, or about $10.25 over the tax year. So just to understand the impact of the 1% foregone. Again, it's important for us to continue to maintain the resources necessary to maintain our critical services. We talked about this, and this was kind of a phenomenon last year. We're going to kind of see how this plays out this year. But last year, residential properties appreciated at a much faster rate than many commercial properties, and ended up representing a larger share of the total assessed valuation. A lot of single-family homes saw increases of 40% or more in their assessed valuation last year in 1 year. And so last year, and this is for 2023, FY 2023, so last fiscal year, if you had a home with an assessed valuation of $491,000, our increase, so the city's 3% and the 1% increase last year would have increased that homeowner's property taxes by $63 per year, or just a little over $5 per month. But the valuation shift that home saw, and that example was actually my house, actually ended up with $298 on top of that $63 in that 1 year. So $300 of the increase was result in valuation growth, and $60 was the actual city increase to levy that we actually received any new dollars. So if we had not changed our levy at all, not received a dime of additional property tax revenues, that homeowner was still going to pay $300 more, per year, just due to that valuation shift.
For our avid audience and viewers at home, just to recap, it is in state code that the valuation process the county handles is based on market values,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
Great.
Yep. Yeah. The county has a duty and obligation to value properties at market rate. And so that is their responsibility. We talked about these examples last year, and this is from last year. So, but it's just important to note that you looked at different property types. We had a fast food restaurant, we had a 120 unit apartment complex, we had a retail building, and we had a single family home. And you had the 2021 assessed valuation for each of those properties, and then the 2022 assessed valuation and the change. And so a lot of those commercial properties had a smaller gain. So the fast food restaurant went up 11.5%, and their city levy went down $393. They're going to pay $393 less. That apartment complex went up 2.2%. So their property tax levy actually went down by almost $8,000. Retail building went up 13.6. So they had a loss, they had a reduction of their property tax bill by $444. And then that single family home went up that 40.5% and saw the $348 year. And again, the bulk of that was due to that value shift. But just so people understand, kind of, there was some concerns that all of a sudden the city was getting all this new money. No, we're only getting that $60 per year. Somebody else was paying less and you're paying more. It's just a shift of that burden. This year, we'll kind of see how that works out. So this is, again, looking at 2023 levies. We really picked the cities that are within a range of our population. That red dash line represents the average levy rate for last year. Moscow's are shown in green, so we're just right around the average for our levy rates per thousand of assessed valuations. So we were at 405 last year, and the average was just under $4 per thousand of assessed valuation. We'll drop down to that 361 this year. It's also important to note that just looking maybe at our nearest neighbor city with the city of Lewiston, levy rates are significant, but so is assessed valuation. Lewiston's levy rate is almost double what our current levy rate is. They have about 30% larger population, and they collect 300% more in property tax revenue. So they last year collected $23.3 million in property tax revenues, and we collected $6.8 million to serve the community. And this just kind of shows historical tax rates. The green shows any bond debt tax. So the swimming pool was paid off in 2018. You see no bond debt in 2019. That's when we ran the election for the police services facility. So you see that bond debt coming on in 2020. Again, that's a 10-year note. So after 2023, we'll have 6 more years of payments, and then that portion of the city's property tax levy will go away. So for the property tax allocation for the proposed budget, you'll see the 6.8 million was our general fund property tax for last year. That number will grow to 7.1 million. We'll still collect approximately the same amount for the bond and interest payments for the police facilities, just a little over $1 million. That will bring our total property tax levy to just over 8 million, 8,192,588. And this is our table, just shows the increase, and I'll just hone in on the bottom. So it just kind of does a calculation of the foregone, the new construction to 3%, and the levy rate shown kind of in the mid right there. And then at the bottom, you've got a table of what this means to the owner of a home of a certain value. So for this one, it's a 400,000 assessed valuation. After the homeowner's exemption of 125,000, that leaves 275 as taxable value. Underneath last year's levy rate, they would pay $1,113 for the year for FY24 if their home value doesn't change. And that's going to be the qualifier. I showed you what happened last year if somebody's home value changed the 40%. But if that home value didn't change, because it's a little bit different, I looked up mine and I moved about 11% this year compared to the 40.5 last year. So we'll kind of depend upon that evaluation. If the value doesn't change, then they would pay $120 less this year in property taxes to the city. If it grew by that 11% that mine did, then they'll pay about $3.25 a month more over the course of the year. So just so you have a sense of if that's representative of what's happening in the real estate market, what the homeowner will be seeing. There is some additional property tax relief that the legislature did pass. It was focused around school district facilities and bond levies. It's unclear exactly how that's going to get calculated out and what benefits is going to provide. It's based on a certain percentage of income, then it's going to be allocated on the number of homeowners exemptions in the county. But we're not sure how that calculation is going to, what it will result in ultimate property tax savings to homeowners. But there will be some additional reduction people should see this year as well. So just a little bit about our revenue sources. So the city's total budget is $120,747,285. A large portion of that is fund balance for the utility. So we have about $54 million of improvements that are needed at the wastewater treatment facility or the water reclamation facility over the course of the next 10 years. And so we currently have 16 million in reserves in the sewer fund getting ready for those projects. We have similar amounts, lesser amounts in the water fund. Some general fund balances. So we have a fair amount of fund balance that makes up a portion of our revenues. The next largest is charges for services. Most of that's utilities, or it may be permits, construction permits, but most of that's for charges for service utilities. Property tax itself makes up 6.9% of our total revenues. You have franchise tax, a little bit of road and bridge, license and permits. Intergovernmental revenues are going to be the state shared revenues for sales tax, which is just a little bit under 3 million. Typically, we have operating transfers and capital transfers that kind of round out the revenue sources. And then where it goes, 31% of our expenditures are in enterprise fund capital work. So again, it's those capital improvement projects for replacing water lanes, aging sewer lines, roadway projects. So capital construction for the enterprise funds, general governmental capital outlay. That's where we do a lot of our road improvement projects. So it's not the enterprise funds, but it's for general capital work. General government activities, about 8.85%. Public safety, just under 10%. Rec and culture, transportation, utilities, and otherwise. If you look just solely at the city's general fund, so that does not include special revenue or the enterprise funds, the police department makes up 34% of our expenditures. The police department this year is probably going to be $600,000 more than all property taxes we collect in the city. So it's a pretty significant portion of our expenditures. You see the fire department's at 7%, community development 11%. Non-departmental is where we have a lot of our larger transfers. So if we're going to, the general fund collects monies, and so a lot of our rec and culture programs can't fund themselves. The playgrounds, the park maintenance, the indoor rec facilities, those programs don't fund themselves. So the general fund has to transfer monies to help supplement the revenues they receive from programs. So we transfer $2.8 million, to the Rec and Culture Fund to fund all the park and rec operations and activities. Where we're making non-departmental this year also has a $2 million payment to the airport to make our terminal contribution payment this year. Where if we're going to be transferring funds from the general fund to general fund capital, that happens in non-departmental. So a lot of those big transfers show up in non-departmental, and that's why it's such a large percentage on the pie chart.
Bill, before we go any further, your statement was this year the police department will be 600,000 more than what we bring in property tax.
Let's see,
That's what you
police
said.
department is 7.7 million
Uh-huh.
is total cost. And we are just 7.1 million, I think, in general property tax collection.
Thank you.
And are you accounting for the money from the state? The money that they were gonna contribute because of the large investigation?
That was under 100,000, 83,000. That's in this fiscal year. So they gave us some reimbursement for overtime expense.
Okay.
That's in the
Never
current fiscal year in 23. So that it wouldn't affect 24. So just quick.
Let's hope.
Yeah. Just a couple quick updates. Franchise fees. So we are expecting a 6% increase. That's about 34,000 due to increased utility rates. We have seen a slight increase in cell tower co-location fees. We've had some more facilities installed on city water tanks and reservoirs. State shared revenues are actually tracking about 200,000 behind the state's forecast for this year. We are forecasting another 95,000 decrease for next year. We are seeing some increases in fiber optic user fees as we lease more strands of fiber. And investment earning, I mean, the only good thing about inflation is investment earnings are doing better than they were. But we're paying it out on the other end, so I'm not sure it's really a net gain at the end of the day, but we are seeing increased investment earnings this year. And then we had some fund balance accumulation that were moved in. This is, about a third of this was accumulated CARES Act monies that we had identified for the runway or for the terminal project. And so we're bringing that into the general fund to make that $2 million airport terminal contribution. On the streets revenues, the highway, road, and bridge tax revenues are forecasted to be about 240,000 more than FY23, so that's a good thing. The governor has allocated additional funding for transportation. Unfortunately, a lot of these are one-time monies. They're the surplus spenders, and so they came in 23, and they're going to come quarterly here in 24. We don't know what will come after that, but it's good to see additional increases that year. The general fund will continue to transfer the 120,000 to the street fund. You may recall about probably over a decade ago, we ran a ballot initiative to equalize out the natural gas and electric franchise utilities. It was going to net 120,000 that we committed to contribute to street improvements. And the street had some accumulation that they're bringing in for this to move over to street capital. Rec and culture, so a lot of the fees you'll see in the fee resolution that they'll talk about next are forecast to increase about 15% for programs. They haven't had any real substantial increases in 3 to 4 years, and we're just trying to look at the cost of those programs. Swimming pool, same way. The general fund transfer to rec and culture, as I mentioned before, remains fairly consistent to what it was in 2023. So we're only up about 1,000 in that transfer for rec and culture. And we have 157,000 accumulated so far underneath the 1% for our ordinance. For utility rates, water rates are proposed to increase by 4% in accordance with the rate study. Sewer rates will increase 2.25%. And stormwater is going to increase 3% just due to inflationary cost on that utility as well. Sanitation, as you've heard recently, has a mix. You'll see a decrease in mechanical containers. So dumpsters will go down 3.2%. And then residential roll carts will go up 4.9% to equalize out the cost of service. So we did a rate study here in the last year. It identified that that the cost of service, we were charging a little bit too much on the dumpsters, a little too little on the roll carts, and we're working to equalize that out. And other miscellaneous rates will be increased by 1.5%. For the water fund, largest expenditure in the budget beyond just personnel, we include 440,000 for the advanced metering infrastructure. So this is the opportunity to install and begin the project, a multi-year project to install meters that can be read remotely, not just a drive-by remote read, but actually talk to an antenna on water tower and be able to read it live, in the utility billing office. That'll give us the opportunity to identify leaks sooner for customers, identify them, they have a problem, take reads more easily on a move in, move out. And so that'll help improve both our water management and our operations of the utility. We have continued to make our debt service payments on our revolving loan fund for those water improvements, and we'll be transferring about $2.4 million to the water capital fund. Sewer fund expenses, we've got just about $500,000 of R&M out at the water reclamation facilities for repairs and maintenance. And we'll also be transferring $3.1 million to the sewer capital fund to accumulate for that $54 million in projects we have in the next 10 years. On the water capital fund, again, same transfer in coming from the water fund, $2.4 million. We also had a beginning fund balance of $7.1. Important to note that that $7.1 million fund balance includes the $3.7 million of ARPA funding that the council allocated to water capital improvements. Water has been our poorest fund for funding a lot of the needed capital improvements, and so we allocated the ARPA funds to that utility. So that did boost that fund balance. We also will be receiving, hopefully by the end of the year, our second round of revolving loan funding. You may recall we had a series of improvements, which included the development of well 10 and the replacement of 5 booster stations that ended up costing about triple what we had anticipated. We were going to take a $4.3 million loan from DEQ. We ended up having to take a second to be able to finish those projects. So we will begin that debt service payment in FY25. That will reduce the fund's ability to transfer to capital a little bit, but we do have that ARPA funding there seeding that as well. Again, investment earnings are a little bit higher due to that interest rates. On expenses, water's a fairly light year this year. We had large expenditures this year, the $3 million in booster improvements. But for capital work for the upcoming fiscal year, we have about a little over $500,000 water line improvements, some chlorine generators, and then an ending fund balance about $9.1 million. We have about $11 million capital expenses forecast over the next 10 years, and we've had a few new projects pop up with well 10 has had a little bit higher iron and manganese than we anticipated. So we do expect we'll have to do filtration there. That'll probably be several $1 million on that. And then as we look at some of this new development, storage is probably going to come into play here pretty soon, and that'll be a fairly large expense. So we're just kicking off on the water comprehensive plan updates. That'll help us identify any of those capital improvements that may be currently not accounted for. On the sewer capital fund, again, revenues transferred from sewer fund, $3.1 million. We had a $16 million beginning fund balance. Investment earnings as well, up at $307,000. But on expenses, we are a little heavy on the sewer fund this year, about $1.4 million in sewer main replacements, $1.9 million at the WRF to begin design of phase 5 for UV disinfection and chiller installation to meet temperature standards at the facility. We have about a little over $800,000 lift station renovations and as well as some other miscellaneous projects. We're forecasting ending fund balance $15.7 million at the end of FY24. Again, we've got about $58.4 million forecast in the next 10 years for improvements in that fund.
Haley.
Sanity check. So the water reclamation, this is tied to the, when we say sewer, we're also talking like our wastewater management facility, right? And this is tied to the EPA
Correct.
stuff.
The NPDES permit for the water reclamation facility.
Are we still on track to meet the needed, what I'm trying to say, improvements to prevent us from seeing
Another fine?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've made good progress, and we've kept DEQ, who now has primacy over the program, informed. We just wrapped up and completed an updated facility plan. We're now in the stage of negotiating scope of work for design services for essentially that $1.9 million for phase 5 improvements. That'll probably be, I'd guess, an almost 2-year project before we look at construction, but I think DEQ has been happy with the progress that we've been making.
Phase 5 of, do we know how many phases?
There's many.
Love it.
Yeah.
Cool.
58.
Yeah, we'll be starting to, this is the regulatory compliance phase for the temperature. We have capacity that we need to start working on headworks and beyond. And then as well as the filter press and the biosolids, we need to be working on those as well. We do have some pinch points at the facility.
Did I dream that we had primacy at one point on this project and then now the state has it? Or the EPA has it?
State has primacy over EPA.
It used to be us directly.
Used to be, EPA used to directly regulate us. The state now has primacy over that permit.
EPA says.
Okay, so
But EPA is always in the back.
Yeah,
corner,
lurking.
looking over the shoulder. Yeah.
background. Okay, I thought that I heard EPA had primacy.
I'm sorry if I misspoke.
Okay, okay. I just like to hold on to a few facts in my head.
On capital projects, so we do have some revenues. We have 888,000 in grant funds coming in. We have donations of 525,000. These are labeled as donations. These are actually contributions from the Moscow Urban Rural Agency to support projects in the district. Investment earnings at 197,000. General funds pushing about $1 million to capital this year. We have a little bit of a transfer out of the Moscow School District Community Playfields where we are accumulating for future improvements at that facility, and street funds transferring 1.3 million to the capital. So we'll have a beginning fund balance as well for resources of about 6.3 million in that fund. For expenses, we're beginning design on the city shop project. So we have about 255,000 forecast for that. Streetscape program at 350. This is kind of programmed in conjunction with the South Main Underpass project, the pedestrian and bicycle underpass that's proposed just at the South Couplet to do some improvements in that area. And then we have some seed money for the sidewalk program to continue to expand improvements and address ADA accessibility issues on sidewalks in accordance with our transition plan. Roadways will be fairly heavy this year, 2.2 million for roadway improvements. That includes the pedestrian underpass, a initial through lane, Highway 8 at the South Couplet, South Main Pathway project, and reconstruction of A Street up here by Russell, where the road is deteriorating pretty significantly. Another 300,000 in our slurry seal or AR chip surface treatment program. And then we'll begin design on the Mountain View Transportation Alternative Program grants. So these are the two $500,000 grants that we received to improve Mountain View between Joseph and the fairgrounds, as well as between F Street up to Sloniker Drive.
Mr. Belknap, I have a question. I can't. So you talked about the streetscape and then it ended up being the South Couplet or the underpass on 95?
Correct. There's two projects. There's the underpass itself. We have funds budgeted for, and then we also have funds budgeted for streetscape improvements at the South Couplet for aesthetic improvements.
Okay.
So that
That's
project will be
substantial.
removing the old US 95 bridge.
Oh,
There'll be
yeah.
a fair amount of landscape restoration and improvement that we'll need to construct there. So we do have funding for that.
But we want to wait until 95 is done to do so, right?
No, this is just at the South Couplet. So right there by,
Got it. Malfunction Junction. Got it.
there you go. That's the name.
I was confused because we
Yeah,
just
got
had downtown streetscape thing. So you had streetscape.
Yep. So you may recall we have the streetscape. Well, we have the city interior beautification plan. It identified 8 different areas for improvements to improve the aesthetics. This was one, and given that it's going to be torn up fairly significantly with the project and the removal of the bridge, we were going to do some landscaping improvements to improve the aesthetics because that's really by that Sweet Avenue entry to campus and try to make that a little bit more presentable.
And safe. That's good. Okay.
Then looking at parks building improvements, we do have some glue lamp beams at the HERC that we need to repair. So we're beginning design work or construction work on that, 155,000. And then for park improvements, we believe Rolling Hills 10th or 11th would be going the city underneath the agreement where we purchased parkland up at the Mosier Park. We have the obligation for frontage improvements along that park. So we have funding budgeted for that, as well as beginning improvements in Harvest Park. And a pathway replacement of Carol Ryrie Brink Park there on the north edge of the playfields. The tree roots have destroyed that, so we'll be replacing that as well. And we are forecasting any fund balance about 6.8 million in that one. Okay. So my apologies for the length of that, but just covering the highlights of the budget. The council's action this evening is to conduct a public hearing, accept any public testimony that you may receive. There are 2 actions for you. The first, because we are proposing to take the 1% foregone, you have to pass a resolution to that effect. So we have that in your packet. So you have to approve that first. And then the second would be to approve the appropriation ordinance, which we recommend under suspension of the rules. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, hearing none, let's move on to public testimony. And so like in the preceding public hearing, testimony from the public in favor. Step on up. Victoria, were you writing notes while we went through that?
Editing. That's even better.
So I attended the
Victoria
Victoria
Seaver.
Seaver 121 North Lily. Moscow. Okay, so I attended the budget workshop and nothing stood out beyond the normal budget and fee type things. Inflation hits everybody. City is not exempt. City does not make a profit. It does not have deep pockets. If it wasn't for our diligent staff, management, grants, partnerships like the URA and the ARPA funds and whole lots of things, we wouldn't have money for much of anything. So the city has to pay its fair share cost. It's got to pay construction like anybody else. It's got to do utilities, fire, swimming pool. I don't go swim at the swimming pool, but I want the city to have it. And the farmer's market and parks, it's just the basic stuff. And that all needs to be there. And I want the water to work and I want the sewers to work. And so that's what the budget's for. And only because we do a really good job do we have the money to get things done. So the 3% increase is what's allowed, and certainly no surprise because it doesn't cover inflation. It hasn't covered inflation for the last several years. We're behind like everybody else, and it needs to be there. The 1% foregone is fair and reasonable. It indicates that in the past, when we didn't need 3%, you didn't get happy with spending our money, you didn't make 3%. So the only reason why we have it to go back to now is because you don't overspend. So that's fine too. And it means that during that time we had a tax break because we didn't have to pay 3% at that time. So we've had a tax break. It's just not going to happen now. So I would approve this budget, and I think you do a good job. And that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Victoria. Further testimony in favor? Testimony in opposition? And testimony of a general nature? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and council commence with deliberations.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to add for our avid audience and viewers at home that we go through a budget workshop process where we are able to go through all of our binders and go through this with a fine-tooth comb. I sometimes worry about the optics of us maybe not asking as many questions in this setting, just to clarify that we've had the chance to ask lots of questions and deliberate 3 weeks ago all day long in this setting. So just for added context. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm not wild about raising taxes as much, and doing the full 3% plus 1%, and thought about this a lot. But I've also seen the city at work, and I think I agree with Victoria that nobody is a spendthrift in the city, and we do enjoy a lot of community services here, and that costs money. And we have a really high rate of inflation this year. So I think it just is what it is. We're just going to have to raise the rate, do the full 3% plus 1%. But I look forward to the day when we don't actually have to do that.
Can I ask a hypothetical of Bill?
Yeah.
Is there a scenario where valuation looks great and revenue is tracking, where we're not having to look at an increase of 3% on a levy to be able to give your staff what you need as far as fair compensation, COLA, and like market adjustment and performance?
I'm sure there's a hypothetical. I've never seen it. I'm sure it could happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you really would have to have that new construction value come in exceptionally high.
Okay.
But it ranges between 40 and 60,000, typically 80
Right.
this year is a little high. You'd have to have substantial new construction, and we grow at a slow enough pace. We've never seen that. I mean, you've got a $19 million payroll. 1% increase on that is 190, almost 200,000. That's our 3%, right? Almost right there.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to keep up any type of cost of living, I mean, it's just our levy is so low. What we collect from it is so low. And then everything else just, comes to us. State shared revenues based on sales tax spending. I mean, the formula rework a couple of years ago was really good. That helped us. It gave us extra couple $100,000. But I mean, we're thin.
I'm with, yeah, it's not fun. I mean, it's I don't love the chips we're playing with, but we're playing with the cards we have. And it is really important to me that as we are also in providing goods and services, that we are adequately compensating our people who are doing the work every day. And so I'm just like running through this with the tools that we have, with the levers that we actually have available to pull. It is really important to me that our staff of just under 200,
170,
that they're adequately and fairly compensated for their time and energy, because they are also without them, we don't have the services, parks, and things like that. So it goes back to the people for me. So I am ooky, but engaged to move forward with the 3% and the 1% for one.
I'm not really sure what ooky means, but I might be saying the same thing once we get done. I too don't have a lot of questions because I asked a fair amount of them at our workshop. And while there are spots in this budget that seem to hurt more than others, I think like the Parks and Rec for 15% increase bugs me, but it's important, and they haven't taken an increase for quite a few years. I think we are doing a lot with a very, very little. And I don't like the word tax any more than anybody else does. And I don't like foregone either, to be real honest with you, but we have to. And in order to continue providing the services and the community benefits that we do, we have to do it, in my opinion. And so I don't know if ooky, maybe I feel okay about it, other than a few little pain points that I can probably live with.
Yes, to all of that, I agree completely. It's hard. I am actually really impressed with the work that our city is able to do with what we have. The Parks and Rec increase 15%, that seems like a lot. I think about the kids going out and trying to do games and big families, and that's tough. And I'm also glad that we can find ways to put scholarship programs together, maybe get help along the way from other community folks. So that would be okay. Really, when I look at what we do here in town, I'm astounded at the things we are able to do. I think about Victoria. She gave her street address and it's been torn up all year, man, and trying to get her house, whether it's to visit or to say hi. I look by it all the time and I just kind of wave because, man, that stuff, it's been tough for a long time. And I know a lot of people are going through that. We get funny comments about, I can't believe I just broke my windshield because of the chip seal. I'm like, man, do you know how much money that's saving us though? Sorry about your windshield, but man, it's a great thing. So, you read about it in the paper, which I hope people do. And it might make people go, what are they talking about? It's an increase. It is, but I think it's pretty amazing that it's only this amount. And I'm thankful for the hard work that the staff does. They bleed over this, I know. And I really do. I hate that we have to increase, but we do. And this is really, honestly, for what we have in this town, which is an amazing little town. I'm grateful for the work and the things we're able to do. And I think it's just our little tiny bit we can do to say, sorry, this one stings, but the rest of it's pretty great.
Drew, Maureen? Are you okay?
No, I'm not.
I think I finish these budget hearings every year and I'm amazed at how little money we get and how much we do with that money. The idea that we get 7% of our budget from property taxes, like, oh my gosh, how do we do this? And I appreciate that a lot because I'm afraid that, I guess my sense is we make Moscow what it is. We have parks, we have art, we have a pool, we have all kinds of activities. And I think it wouldn't be what we are if we didn't have those activities. And I'm glad that we can somehow move all those pieces in the Rubik's Cube around to make it work. But it's really a struggle and it's a lot of work on the part of the staff, just to even figure out, our dear friend Sarah sitting out there, making it all work. And so thank you all for the work. And I think, yes, we're lucky.
Drew?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of things that have been said. I don't want to be redundant about those, but you know, for a first time reviewing the budget, personally spending a couple long nights and weekends reviewing that, I almost have my head straight about how this worked, but I'm still in awe of how things work, and I think it's pretty amazing. Having lived in other communities in Idaho, other cities in Idaho, having family and friends that come and visit Moscow, I think they're constantly amazed about what we do have to offer. What they don't realize is how much money we don't operate with to get those things done. And I think it's amazing. I don't like taxes, I'll be honest. I find them important. And they're, I see why they're necessary, but, and they're necessary in this case. And for all the other reasons that people have talked about, I don't have vocabulary like Haley, but, you know,
Ookie.
Ookie.
Ookie is the word.
Ookie, but, you know, it's, you know, but anyone that's listening will listen in the future, is listening today. Until you actually go through and read and understand the budget, it's, I'm just going to be blunt. Don't complain about it until you do that, because it's difficult to do with what city staff is doing. And I've worked with lots of them before being on council and currently, and it's pretty great. So I enjoy the parks, I enjoy the pool, I enjoy the farmer's market, I enjoy all the things, right? And so that's why I live here. So you don't have to travel too far to find a city close to us. And I think there's reasons why we live here, and we do a far better job with the money that we get, in my humble opinion. So I'm not going to say what city. They're not my constituents though.
Oh, now I'm allowed to talk. I move,
Sorry.
Your Honor,
Yes, very good.
that we approve the foregone tax recovery resolution.
Second.
Further discussion? Okay. Maureen,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
Drew,
Hi.
Gina,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
and Haley.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Is there a second part to this?
Is it that number 2?
There's 3, in fact.
Yep.
I move that we approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings. Do we have to read that part?
Yep, that's the motion.
And that it be read by title and published by summary.
Right
There
on.
you go.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded by Gina. Further discussion? Okay, Gina,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
Haley,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
and Drew.
Aye.
Okay, number 7. The ordinance.
Do we need to do the L?
2023-07.
L2.
Well, I'll read this one now, and then we'll do that after this. So 2023-07. An ordinance entitled Annual Appropriation Ordinance appropriating $120,747,285 for the purpose of defraying all the necessary expenses and liabilities of the city of Moscow, Latah County, state of Idaho, for the 2024 fiscal year, beginning the first day of October 2023 and ending the 30th day of September 2024, and allocating resources by fund for said appropriation for the objects and purposes set forth in this ordinance, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, providing that this ordinance be in full force and effect from and after its passage, approval, and publication according to law. There we go.
That was awesome.
Oh, I thank you.
I move that we authorize the mayor's execution of the L2 property tax certification in the aggregate amount of $8,214,483.
And Maureen seconds again. Okay, Drew,
Aye.
Julia,
Aye.
Maureen,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Sandra,
Aye.
and Haley.
Aye.
There we go. Okay, that kind of wraps up the budget business. Another public hearing,
We found the tree.
and this is for the fiscal year 2024 fee resolution. Bill Belknap again.
Thank you, Your Honor. This presentation is shorter, I promise.
It would have to be.
Ouch. All right, so the fee resolution contains all fees charged by the city for services and programs. By Idaho code, we must conduct a public hearing for any new fees or increases to existing fees by more than 5%. Staff has reviewed various programs, costs, rate studies, and prepared a proposed fee resolution for the council consideration. These fees would become effective on October 1st of this year and carry through the end of September. On the utility side, this is a replay. As we talked, water rates proposed to increase by 4%, sewer rates by 2.25%, stormwater 3%, and then sanitation again 3.2% decrease in mechanical containers and a 4.9% increase in the roll carts, and miscellaneous rates by 1.5%. Most other fees throughout the fee resolution, generally it's a 3 to 5% increase just to help account for inflationary costs, additional staff, or other material costs. There are a few that exceed that number. So normally for building permits, we get our valuations in the ICC valuation table. It gets published in March of every year. It's what we utilize to value construction permits. There are certain types of structures that ICCU doesn't put a value to. Decks, pole buildings, and basements are one. So we put a value in the fee resolution. We've not adjusted that for, I think, 3 years. So we are proposing to increase those valuations per square foot by 15% to account for increased construction cost. As noted before, many recreation programs across the board were increased by 15%. Again, with 3 to 4 years of not having increases in increased program costs and materials. Facility rentals were increased in a range from 18 to 35% to reflect true cost after no increases again for several years. There were a few small programs that had some fairly, on a percentage basis, substantial increases. I think cornhole and horseshoes were the ones, like 40 to 54%. Again, those were moving up like $5. It was 12 and it went to like 17.
And the parks always look great when I was playing horseshoes.
So it's on a percentage basis, you know, it looks big. I just wanted to highlight that, but it's not a lot for those individual programs. Sewer tapping fees were increased 87%, again, to increase cost of service. Bacterial testing at our lab was increased by 122% to cover the actual laboratory costs. Large water meters, so 1.5 inch and larger, the meters themselves went up dramatically, as did the enclosure boxes they reside in. So those went up 102%, up to 102% on some of those larger meters. And again, that's just to recover our cost of the supplies.
Supply chain thing.
Yeah. So those are the big ones. So I'm done with my presentation. So the action for the council on this one is to conduct the public hearing. And after, I hit a button. After considering public testimony, approve the fee resolution as proposed. And with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions the council might have.
Okay, public hearing's open. Questions from council?
No.
We have to pay to play cornhole?
It's so for what it's worth, there are sanctions. So as a former city horseshoe league person, who would play on Tuesdays at Gormley, there are people who you have to have X number of like games for like some of like the national leagues, like the American leagues, at least for horseshoes, and cornhole is much more intense than that. So to be like a sanctioned and like the parks maintenance and like I went to a fundraiser cornhole game and I got yelled at because I did not know the rules. So like it was a fundraiser. It wasn't even a city league. So they are very popular. It just there's rules.
And this is a league that we set up that people participate, not just spontaneously going to park and playing cornhole.
Oh,
Like for softball. Softball.
I learned something new today. I just thought you played that in the backyard with,
Since it's on ESPN now.
and
It's incredible. I'll send you some videos. It's great. I recommend.
Is it pickleball the same way?
No, we don't have.
We don't have any
leagues yet.
leagues on that right now.
Yet.
Yeah.
I don't know that we would be popular if we took pickleball courts
course.
offline for a league situation.
Got 24 hours in a day. It's true.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions before the actual public hearing portion. So like it leads with like the arts increase, and I noticed like we've got like the arts and the rec that have some significant increases. Arts not as much as significant, but I noticed like the business licensing didn't have percentage change in fees. Is that just because the nature of like the services we're providing by doing those business licensing.
A number of those are set by state.
Okay, I couldn't remember where it doesn't.
So,
where,
so like the alcohol licensing is all set by state. So
Okay.
we don't set that. We cannot add additional fee on top of that. So that's why
So-
a number of those didn't increase.
okay, I couldn't remember where we had jurisdiction. And as far as like the cost for the rec things, does we compensate our instructors for some of these classes, right? Through rec,
We have to pay them.
we have to pay them. And
Yeah, so a lot of private instructors do the programs and then we pay them for their services.
And so our increase, and this must have happened after I dropped off the phone call with the budget workshop. Did this would have come from instructors giving input on what they needed for us to keep?
It's coming
retaining
from our
their
rec
services?
managers that run the programs and understand the cost of providing the programs.
Ruby, okay. That's what I have.
Okay, at this time, any public testimony in favor? Public testimony in opposition? Public testimony of a general nature? Okay, hearing none, the hearing is closed and the council deliberates on the fee resolution.
I do have one last question. The traffic control fee changes, I saw that we have like the new divisions for like Main Street closures. Is that in like direct response from like our community development team, like working to make sure we're right sizing the fees for like what the reservation is?
Correct.
Because we did just have one size fits all.
Providing different
previously.
options.
Okay, thank you. With that,
Yes, please.
I move approval of the fiscal year 2024 fee resolution
As
as
proposed.
proposed.
Second.
Gina, no, Maureen beat you.
That was
Maureen got it.
Sandra. That was Sandra. I was sleeping.
Maureen got it. Okay, Haley,
Aye.
Sandra.
Aye.
Gina?
Aye.
Maureen?
Aye.
Julia?
Aye.
And Drew?
Aye.
Okay, that one passes and perhaps blissfully takes us to the end of our agenda, except for reports.
Your Honor,
Yes,
what if we might suspend reports this evening, just
Okay.
given the hour and executive session on the agenda?
great. Okay,
But I've got so many notes to share. I'm kidding.
That's
I'm
why.
kidding. I'm kidding. I had nothing to share anyways.
What are the tape and
okay.
play?
So at this time, need a motion to adjourn to executive session per Idaho Code 74-206, 1F, and the meeting will not reconvene after the executive session.
So moved.
Okay.
Sandra
Haley?
did that one.
Nope, that's not me.
Nope,
Sandra.
we're voting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Aye. I'm so sorry. Aye.
Sandra? Gina?
Aye.
Maureen?
Aye.
Aye.
And Drew.
Aye.
Council adjourned and moving.
Give her report.